Millionaire took his ugly secretary to dinner, and the world wasn't ready for what happened next. No one noticed her when she walked into the building. That was the point. Elena Cross had mastered the art of being invisible long before she ever stepped foot inside the 47-story glass tower that housed Hawthorne Global Holdings. She wore the same loose sweaters every day. Neutral colors. Nothing fitted. Nothing memorable. Her dark hair was always pulled back tightly, as if she were apologizing for existing. At 28, Elena had already learned a painful truth about the world. People decide your worth before you ever speak. And once they do, it's almost impossible to change their minds. She moved quickly across the marble lobby, eyes lowered, heels clicking softly against the polished floor. Executives in tailored suits brushed past her without a glance. Assistants whispered into Bluetooth headsets. Security guards nodded politely, but only because they nodded at everyone. To them, Elena was just another background character. But on the top floor of that building sat a man whose life she controlled in ways no one ever realized. Lucas Hawthorne. 36. Billionaire. CEO. Cold, precise, devastatingly successful. The media called him the Iron King of Finance. Investors feared him. Competitors studied him like a storm they couldn't predict. He had built an empire from nothing and he trusted almost no one. Almost. The elevator doors opened on the executive floor, and Elena stepped out, already flipping open her planner. She didn't need to check it. She had Lucas Hawthorne's schedule memorized down to the minute. She knocked once on the office door. "Come in." His voice was sharp, efficient, always in control. Elena entered quietly, placing a porcelain cup of espresso on his desk at the exact angle he preferred. 2 sugar packets. No spoon. Tablet on the right. Printed documents on the left. "Good morning, Mr. Hawthorne," she said softly. "Your 9 a.m. call with Zurich has been confirmed. The legal team sent revised contracts at 6:12 a.m. I flagged the discrepancy on page 14, and your lunch meeting with the board has been moved forward by 30 minutes. Lucas barely looked up. "Cancel the Zurich call. Reschedule for tomorrow," he said, eyes locked on his screen. "And push the board meeting back. I need more time." "It's already been handled," Elena replied calmly. "I anticipated the conflict." That made him pause just slightly. He glanced up for half a second. Not at her face. Never her face. Just enough to acknowledge her presence. "Good," he said. "Anything else?" Elena hesitated. There it was. The moment she'd been dreading. "Yes, sir," she said, fingers tightening around her folder. "The Harrington Foundation dinner is tomorrow evening. Ms. Vale called this morning. She canceled." Lucas's jaw tightened. That dinner wasn't optional. It was a high-profile charity event attended by politicians, donors, and power brokers. Showing up alone would spark rumors. Rumors investors love to weaponize. "How inconvenient," he muttered. "I can arrange another guest," Elena offered. "Or reach out to—" "No," Lucas interrupted. He leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing in thought. Then he said something that made Elena's heart stop. "You'll come with me." The room went silent. "I'm sorry," she said, certain she'd misheard. "You heard me," he replied flatly. "You know the business, the people, and the conversations. I don't need a model. I need someone competent." Elena's stomach dropped. "Sir, I don't think that's appropriate," she said carefully. "And I don't have." "Use the company card," Lucas said, already turning back to his screen. "Buy whatever you need." She stood there frozen. "Mr. Hawthorne," she whispered, voice shaking despite her best effort to remain composed, "people will stare." That finally made him look at her. Really look at her. For the first time in 3 years. "Let them," he said coolly. "I'm not inviting you because of how you look. I'm bringing you because you're useful." The words stung more than he realized. "Yes, sir," Elena replied quietly. She turned and left his office, her heart pounding. Useful. That was all she'd ever been to anyone. That afternoon, Elena stood outside an upscale boutique downtown, staring at her reflection in the glass. She barely recognized herself. Not because she looked beautiful, but because she'd never seen herself allowed to look like anything else. Inside, a sales associate glanced at her outfit and raised a subtle eyebrow. "May I help you?" the woman asked politely but with unmistakable judgment. "Yes," Elena said, forcing confidence into her voice. "I need something appropriate for a formal charity dinner." The associate hesitated, then smiled tightly. Of course. What followed was something Elena had never experienced in her life. Attention. Fabric chosen carefully. Colors tested against the room that judged her. and the billionaire who wasn't ready for the truth. The moment Elena Cross stepped into the ballroom beside Lucas Hawthorne, the room reacted. Not loudly. Not openly. But unmistakably. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Glasses hovered near lips. Heads turned, slowly at first then all at once. The crystal chandeliers above reflected 100 stolen glances, most of them directed at the woman no one recognized, walking calmly beside one of the most powerful men in the city. Lucas felt it immediately. The weight of attention. The curiosity. The judgment. His hand hovered awkwardly at Elena's back, unsure whether to guide her forward or pull away. He had brought her here for efficiency, for optics, for convenience. But now, as whispers began to ripple through the crowd, he realized he had underestimated the impact of his decision. Elena, on the other hand, felt something else entirely. She felt exposed. Every step forward felt like walking through invisible fire. She could sense the way eyes lingered just a second too long. The way women assessed her dress, her posture, her face, searching for flaws. The way men stared openly, then quickly looked away when Lucas noticed. She had spent most of her life trying to disappear. Now the world refused to let her. "Mr. Hawthorne," a booming voice called out. Lucas turned to see Richard Alden, a senior board member and longtime donor to the Harrington Foundation, approaching with his wife draped elegantly on his arm. "Didn't expect to see you tonight," Alden said with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "And I certainly didn't expect this." His gaze slid to Elena, slow and deliberate. "And who might this be?" Lucas opened his mouth, but Elena spoke first. "Elena Cross," she said warmly, extending her hand. "Mr. Hawthorne's executive secretary." The word secretary landed heavily. Mrs. Alden's smile stiffened. "Oh," she said. "How practical." Elena felt the insult like a slap, but she didn't flinch. "It's a pleasure to meet you both," Elena continued calmly. "I've followed the Foundation's pediatric literacy initiatives closely. The expansion you funded last year increased early reading access by nearly 40%, didn't it?" Richard Alden blinked. "Well, yes, that's correct. It was a remarkable move," Elena said sincerely. "Especially in underfunded districts. I've read the quarterly reports personally." The tone shifted. Mrs. Alden tilted her head, suddenly curious. "You read those reports?" she asked. "I helped compile some of them," Elena replied. Lucas watched in silence as something extraordinary happened. The woman he had always thought of as background noise was commanding the conversation. Gracefully, intelligently, effortlessly. Within minutes, Elena had redirected the discussion toward hospital funding, donor transparency, and long-term impact strategies. She wasn't loud. She wasn't flashy. She was brilliant, and people were listening. Lucas felt a strange, unfamiliar sensation tightening in his chest. Pride. As the evening unfolded, the reactions grew more intense. People didn't just look at Elena anymore. They stared. Whispers followed her from table to table. "Who is she? I thought Hawthorne only dated models. She doesn't look like his type, or maybe she does?" At one point, Lucas overheard a woman mutter, "She must be temporary." He didn't know why, but the comment made his jaw clench. Elena, meanwhile, endured subtle slights with quiet dignity. A waiter addressed Lucas but ignored her. A donor assumed she was hired help. A woman accidentally spilled a drop of champagne near her shoes and offered a hollow apology. Each moment reminded Elena of something she had never forgotten. The world is kind only to those it finds acceptable. But she refused to shrink. When Lucas invited her to dance, the room watched closely. She hesitated, just long enough for him to notice. "I'm not very good at this," she admitted softly. "You don't have to be," he said. As they moved onto the floor, the orchestra's music swelled, and Lucas felt the tension between them sharpen. Her hand rested lightly in his, steady but cautious. "You handle yourself well," he said quietly. "Better than most people in this room." Elena smiled, but there was sadness in it. "I've had a lot of practice," she replied. "Being underestimated is educational." Her words struck deeper than she intended. Lucas studied her face, really studied it this time. Not the dress. Not the elegance. But the intelligence behind her eyes. The restraint. The resilience. How long, when the world tried to put her back in her place, and the past refused to stay buried. Evan Drake didn't rush. Men like him never did. Power had taught him patience. As the elevator doors slid shut behind him, leaving Lucas and Elena standing in tense silence, Evan's smile lingered in the air like poison. He had seen something Lucas hadn't, something valuable, something vulnerable. And Evan Drake had built his fortune on exploiting both. Lucas turned toward Elena immediately. "Don't speak to him alone," he said firmly. "Ever." Elena nodded, though unease crept through her chest. "I wasn't planning to," she replied. But even as she said it, she sensed that Evan Drake wasn't the kind of man who waited for permission. By lunchtime, the whispers had evolved into speculation. By the end of the day, speculation turned into judgment. A senior executive passed Elena's desk and muttered, "Sleeping your way up now, huh?" Another colleague laughed when she walked by. Someone anonymously emailed HR, questioning her professional boundaries. Elena read the forwarded complaint with shaking hands. She had worked harder than anyone in that building. She had sacrificed weekends, sleep, relationships. And now, because she dared to exist outside the box they had placed her in, her integrity was being questioned. That night, Elena didn't stay late. For the first time in 3 years, she left at 5. She walked home instead of taking a cab, letting the cold air numb the ache in her chest. Every step felt heavy, as if the weight of the city itself pressed down on her shoulders. She had known this would happen. The world always corrected women like her when they stepped out of line. Evan Drake made his move 2 days later. Elena was sitting alone at a small cafe near the office, nursing a cup of tea she hadn't touched, when a familiar voice slid into the empty chair across from her. "You look like someone who's had a rough week." She froze. "Mr. Drake," she said carefully, "this isn't appropriate." "Please," he replied smoothly. "Call me Evan. I'm not here to cause trouble." She didn't believe him. "Then why are you here?" she asked. He leaned back, studying her openly. "Because I admire ambition," he said. "And intelligence. And you, Elena Cross, have both." Her fingers tightened around her cup. "What do you want?" Evan smiled, slow and deliberate. "I want to help you." She laughed once, humorless. "Men like you don't help women like me," she said. "That's where you're wrong," he replied. "Men like me help women like you all the time. When it benefits us." He leaned forward. "Lucas Hawthorne has a pattern," Evan continued casually. "He becomes fascinated. He elevates. And then, when the novelty fades, he discards." "That's not true," Elena said sharply. "Isn't it?" Evan countered. "Has he introduced you to his family? To his inner circle? Or are you still his assistant by day and his secret by night?" The word struck with surgical precision. Elena said nothing. Evan nodded, satisfied. "You see," he said softly, "I used to be just like him. And I learned the hard way that men like us don't change." He slid a business card across the table. "I'm offering you something better," he said. "A position. Respect. Visibility. A future where you don't have to hide." Elena stared at the card. "You don't even know me," she whispered. "Oh," Evan said with a smirk. "I know enough." And then he stood, leaving the card behind like a challenge. That night, Elena lay awake replaying everything. Evan's words echoed louder than she wanted to admit. Because doubt is most powerful when it confirms your deepest fears. She began noticing things she had ignored before. Lucas still introduced her as his assistant. He avoided public displays of affection. He never spoke about a future. And when his mother called during a late work night, he stepped into another room, never mentioning her existence. By Friday, the distance between them was palpable. "You're quiet," Lucas said, watching her closely. "What's wrong?" "Nothing," Elena replied automatically. He frowned. "You're lying." She looked up, exhaustion etched into her face. "What are we doing, Lucas?" she asked quietly. He stiffened. "What do you mean?" "I mean, what am I to you?" she said. "Because to the world, I'm still just your secretary." The woman they mocked was the one holding all the power. Elena Cross didn't disappear quietly. She disappeared deliberately. By the time Lucas Hawthorne finished his third unanswered call and realized her resignation wasn't an emotional reaction, but a calculated choice, it was already too late. Elena had closed one chapter of her life with the same precision she had once used to run his. Efficient. Final. Clean. Lucas sat alone in his office long after sunset, staring at the city lights, replaying every moment he had dismissed her, every silence where he should have spoken, every introduction where he had reduced her to a title. Secretary. The word burned now. Elena spent the weekend somewhere no one from Hawthorne Global would ever think to look. A modest brownstone in a quiet part of the city. No doorman. No marble lobby. No illusion of power. Just truth. Inside, she opened a locked drawer and removed a thin leather folder she hadn't touched in years. It held documents, degrees, legal filings, and one photograph. A younger Elena stood beside an older man, both smiling in front of a nondescript office building. Her father, Dr. Samuel Cross. Once celebrated, once respected, once destroyed. Samuel Cross had been a financial ethics expert, one of the sharpest minds in regulatory reform. He had exposed corporate corruption years ago, naming companies powerful enough to bury the truth. One of them had retaliated. They didn't attack him directly. They attacked his credibility. And when his name was dragged through the mud, Elena learned the cost of visibility. She learned how quickly the world turns on people who threaten comfort. So she learned to hide. She earned her degrees quietly, spoke less, took smaller roles, let others take credit. Survival demanded it. Until now. On Monday morning, Evan Drake held a press conference. Lucas watched from his office, dread tightening his chest. Evan stood confidently before reporters, voice smooth as silk. Hawthorne Global has always projected an image of integrity, Evan said. But recent events have raised serious concerns. A reporter asked, "Are you referring to the relationship between Mr. Hawthorne and his former assistant?" Evan smiled faintly. "I'm referring to conflicts of interest, ethical lapses, and the misuse of corporate authority." The words hit like gunshots. Within hours, Hawthorne Global stock dipped. Board members demanded explanations. Investors grew restless. Lucas had never felt so powerless. And then, the counterstrike came. Not from him. From Elena. The article dropped at noon. Former CEO exposes retaliation cover-up. Whistleblower's daughter speaks out. Elena's name was everywhere. But this time it wasn't whispered. It was respected. She stood at a podium, calm, composed, wearing no designer labels, just authority. "My father was silenced for telling the truth," Elena said clearly. "And for years I believed staying invisible would protect me. I was wrong." She revealed documents, evidence, timelines. And one familiar name surfaced again and again. Evan Drake. The room erupted. She was never ugly. The world was blind. The city didn't sleep that night. News channels replayed Elena Cross's press conference on a loop. Headlines scrolled endlessly across screens in airports, cafes, and trading floors. Whistleblower's daughter exposes corporate retaliation. Evan Drake under federal investigation. Power shifts as truth surfaces. But for Elena, the noise faded into the background. She stood alone by her window, watching the lights flicker below, feeling something unfamiliar settle in her chest. Peace. Not victory. Not revenge. Just peace. For the first time in her life, she wasn't hiding. Hawthorne Global changed overnight. Lucas Hawthorne's resignation sent shockwaves through the business world. Analysts called it unprecedented. Critics called it performative. But the employees, those who had watched him work, lead, and sometimes fail, felt something different. Accountability. The board appointed an interim leadership team committed to transparency. Internal reviews were launched. Policies rewritten. And quietly, without press releases or speeches, Lucas began dismantling the very systems that had once protected him. He funded ethics initiatives, whistleblower protections, educational programs. Not for redemption. For responsibility. Weeks later, Elena was invited to speak at a global ethics summit. She stood on stage, unadorned, composed, and entirely herself. "I spent years believing that being overlooked kept me safe," she said. "But silence doesn't protect truth. It only delays justice." The room listened. Not because of who she was connected to, but because of who she was. She didn't mention Lucas. She didn't mention Evan. She didn't need to. Her story spoke louder than names ever could. Their paths crossed again months later. No cameras. No tension. Just two people standing in the same room, changed. Lucas looked different. Less polished. More present. "I wanted to tell you something," he said quietly. Elena nodded. "I don't regret meeting you," he continued. "But I regret not seeing you sooner." She smiled gently. "Most people don't see clearly until something costs them," she said. "And you?" he asked. "What did it cost you?" She thought for a moment. "My fear," she said. They shared a quiet understanding. Not of romance. Of growth. Some connections aren't meant to last forever. They're meant to teach. Months later, Elena Cross founded a nonprofit dedicated to protecting professionals who speak truth to power, especially those dismissed because of appearance, position, or background. Applications poured in. Stories flooded her inbox. And with each one, Elena remembered the woman she used to be. Invisible. Silent. Underestimated. The world had called her ugly. But ugliness